We are now joined by our Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. And Secretary Pompeo, let me go right to this. You tweeted this morning that Hezbollah and Hamas know that they're about to be flush with cash, so their efforts to undermine Middle East stability, the Abraham Accords, and Israel's security will continue. Appeasement of Iran is destabilizing the Middle East, and it's shocking that the Democrats don't understand this. Do you believe that this is going to continue to escalate? I know sometimes things get a little quieter. On Friday, it's Shabbat, it's the Friday prayers as well, but then they can quickly escalate again.
Well, Jordan, look, in the first instance, the responsibility for these terror attacks on Israeli civilians belongs to Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They're the responsible. They're the perpetrators. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank has done nothing to stop it. But make no mistake about it, they are underwritten, supported militarily and financially by the Islamic Republic of Iran. And while this is taking place, while these rockets are landing on civilians in Israel that are of Iranian origin and Iranian support, the United States is sitting at the table in Vienna negotiating to hand over billions of dollars in financial assistance to the very Iranian regime that is funding Hezbollah and Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It makes no sense. I heard what Senator Langford said, what James said. He is spot on in that ask. We need to stop this. You'll remember too, Jordan, the previous administration, the Trump administration that I was a part of, stopped funding the UNWRA, the Palestinians. We're going to turn that back on. We're providing money to the very people that are engaged in terror. This is deeply inconsistent with our commitment to Israel, and we ought to stop it immediately.
I mean, these groups are being they are going on TV, Secretary Pompeo. They are saying that the head of Palestinian Islamic Jihad and one of their leaders went on Palestinian television and said, "We're getting the weapons, we're getting our food, we're getting everything from the Iranians." And I think sometimes there is this kind of divide in Washington thought, even when the leaders tell you that themselves. Well, some of these groups are really Sunni, and Hamas is not really going to be friendly with Iran, and Iran's they're not. It's not like Hezbollah. It's not the same kind of group. But it seems like over the years, it's become a much closer relationship, and it's almost another. Almost you could call it another proxy for Iran. I don't know if you would have called it that 20 years ago, but it's certainly kind of evolved into that or devolved.
Oh, Jordan, I completely agree. No, you can certainly consider Hamas and the PIJ both proxies that are acting in a way that is in support of the Iranian regime's effort to destroy Israel. And they're unambiguous about that. I saw reporting this morning that the head of the IRGC, the Iranian External Terror Organization, was in Lebanon meeting with Hezbollah. If that's true, that would suggest also that this is a coordinated effort, and we need to hold them accountable. We need to make sure that the American leaders aren't just softly supporting what Israel is doing, but making unambiguously clear that the United States fully defends Israel's right to defend itself, and we will continue to support our friend and ally that is defending this important place, the undivided city of Jerusalem, and know that they have America's full support in doing so.
Yeah, this is something historically we've seen bipartisan support, but that has changed. I mean, this new group of far-left Democrats, the same ones who were kind of from the Bernie Sanders world of radical, schools, radical thought, it's becoming more mainstream inside the Democrat Party. I don't think in our country, but inside the Democrat Party. And do you think that's why, Secretary Pompeo, you get this kind of shrug of the shoulders kind of response from Joe Biden?
Absolutely. You have a element inside the Democrat Party that is pro-Palestinian, anti-Zionist, and bordering in some cases and actually past the line on anti-Semitism. These are people who are deeply against the existence, the right for the Israelis to exist in this place, this Jewish homeland, and I think that tears up the Democrat Party. If you go look at Joe Biden of 30 or 40 years ago, he would have been a huge supporter of Israel, and today it is grudging support that they provide to Israel when it does the simple thing of protecting its own citizens from rocket attacks that are killing its civilians, and they respond in a way that is going to protect and defend their sovereignty. I hope this administration will find the right words to make unambiguously clear that we are supporting Israel, and we understand that the terrorists are the Palestinians.
I know that the Israelis have got tough decisions to make. They have to decide if they take this this aggression by Hamas and then try to use the conflict as a way to go deeper into Gaza again to eliminate more of this activity. You see these leaders say, if we don't do it now, this will happen. It happened again another year. They'll build up their missile supply. They'll build up their tunnels again that have been destroyed. They'll fire their rockets again, and we'll just keep repeating this. But there was a time period where this was much more difficult for Hamas to pull off. For about 5-6 years, it seemed like they just didn't have the capabilities. They didn't have the resources. And do you think that was directly because the Iranians were being cut off from the economy of the world?
We know this much. We know that the maximum pressure campaign that we put on Iran denied their proxies resources. We saw that they were able to pay Hezbollah soldiers less money, but just there was less money to go around to go foment terror. And so I absolutely believe that the Iranians and the Hamas terrorists believe they're going to be flush with cash, that the Americans are going to let off the maximum pressure campaign. And so attack of this scale now, I understand over 1,500 rockets launched, would have been much more difficult for them to afford or pull off or keep rockets in reserve just now 120 days ago.
Final question, Secretary Pompeo, because you tweeted this, and it was something, it hit home with me because this is someone who is now the U.S. Special Envoy for Iran, Robert Malley, saying, you got a mistake. If you got to look at Hamas and Hezbollah, look at all the charity work that they do. He talks about how he has relationships with them. And he is active, he's in Vienna now. These are people actively out they are not academics. They are inside the U.S. government as the envoys to Iran, speaking out for the Biden administration. And they're making comments. I mean, it was in the past. But I mean, I think that it's even that, the fact that he wouldn't come out and correct that, it's shocking.
This worldview, Jordan, you've seen it. We've now sent a special envoy to try and de-escalate the situation. I think that's his mission set. The language he's used in support of the Palestinians, who are the terrorists, is simply outrageous to send an American. And look, we know Robert O'Malley. We know his history in negotiating with the Iranians. I can predict with almost certainty the kind of deal that Robert O'Malley would find acceptable.
Dan, there's a lot to break down here from Senator Langford and from Secretary Pompeo.
There really is. My biggest takeaway from those two segments, Jordan, the vast majority of the American people support Israel. That spills over into congressional support. But here's what I'd say, Jordan. There's a way to back up that professed support with action. You heard Secretary Pompeo talk about the maximum pressure campaign. There's a bill called the Maximum Pressure Act that would put the maximum pressure campaign back on. I'd love to see senators and congressmen supporting that bill.